Kumlen and a Black Gemara. Today's daf is Daf Chav Daled Amid Aleph. We're up to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah goes as follows: Ha'isha shenodra ben Nazir. So a woman, she took upon herself to be a Nazir. Bihi frisha es behemta. So she set aside an animal from the beginning. She didn't complete her Naziris yet, but she already set aside an animal. Actually 3 animals, because a Nazir has to bring 3 animals, a chatas and oil and a shlamim. But afterwards, her husband came along and canceled her neder, which we concluded before is from now on she's no longer a Nazir. She was a Nazir for a short period of time, but she's no longer a Nazir. Now, technically, she doesn't have to bring any more the kabbanis for a Nazir because the Nazir stopped. But she already set aside an animal. So what's the status of the animal she set aside? Because at the time she set it aside, she was a Nazir. So it depends. If the behemoth belonged to the husband, so since it belonged to the husband, and the husband only would give it to her if there's a purpose for it, but since she no longer needs the animals because she's no longer a Nazir, so therefore the husband takes back his animals, and there's no kedusha on these animals whatsoever. But the im shalah ha'isa ha'behema, if the animal belonged to her, it's her animal, and since when she set it aside and she was makdish the animal, she was a proper Nazir, so then that animal now is kodesh. Hachatas, so the 3 animals. What do we do with each of the 3 karbanos? The chatas, Thomas. The karma chatas, there's no point in bringing it up because she's no longer a Nazir, but she already made it a chatas at the time when she was able to. So it's like one of the 5 chatoyis, the din is a chatas shemeis balev. If the owner died or was forgiven, you let the chatas die. The oila, what do you do with the other 2 animals, the oila and the shlamim? Tikra of oila, an oila can be brought up as a donation. So you bring it up as an oila, voluntary oila, and a shlamim, tikra shlamim, and the other animals are shlamim, you bring the shlamim. Now the carbon shlamim that a Nazir brings is slightly different than than an ordinary carbon shlamim. Whenever we bring an ordinary carbon shlamim, you can eat it for 2 days and 1 night. Here, you can only eat it for 1 day and 1 night. And also, this carbon shlamim, normally carbon shlamim doesn't have any loaves of bread with it, but this carbon shlamim, known as shalmi nazir, you do bring loaves of bread with it. And plus, normally a carbon shlamim, only the chazay, the sheikh, only the breast and the back, the hind legs go to a kohen. Here, the foreleg as well has to be given to a kohen by a shalmi nazir. So what happens in this case here with this woman? She set aside the animals when she was a Nazir, but 10 minutes later, she was no longer a Nazir. So the oila you bring up as a voluntary oila, the shlamim is a voluntary shlamim. Is it brought up as a shalmi Nazir, or is it brought up as an ordinary shlamim, 2 days and a night, or just 1 day and a night, and so on? So the Mishnah says, even though it's a voluntary shlamim, but we treat it like a Nazir, you can only eat it 1 day and 1 night. And the einon to uni lechem, the normal loaves of bread, on the other hand, that you bring with a Nazir, you don't bring. Machlek is rishonim. If you don't bring it all, and the reason why you don't bring the loaves of bread is because he's supposed to wave it on the hands of the Nazir, but there is no hands of a Nazir here because she's no longer a Nazir. So it means she doesn't bring the bread. So what does it mean doesn't bring the bread? Doesn't bring the bread as a Nazir, but she still brings the loaves of bread with the animal, or she doesn't bring bread at all. Machlek is rishonim. Okay, what happens if she set aside money? Didn't set aside the animal. She set aside money for the kabbalas for the 2 hours she was a Nazir. She set aside money, didn't specify what the money is going for. In that, in that case, yiplul in adaba. The money then goes to the Beis Hamikdash as an adaba, as an offering, which means that they buy animals for the mebech. You cannot have any hana from that money because she already made it holy. She set it aside for her kabbanis. But nor are you moil, nor are you chayiv, because an animal, normally an animal that is set aside, or money set aside for a particular animal, you cannot have any benefit from the animal. If an animal set aside, if you use it for your own purpose, just stealing from Haggish. Except the carbon shlamim. A carbon shlamim, until you sprinkle the blood, there's no me'ilah because me'ilah is only by kosher, only the extra holy animals, not by kosher kalim, not in these animals that are not kodesh. So there's no me'ilah over here whatsoever. Even the karma chatas, there's no mi'ilah because the karma chatas we're not going to have any benefit from whatsoever. So it says here like this: the mei chatas yelchu yamelach. What do you do with the money of the chatas? You throw it away because you can't bring it as a chatas. You can't do anything with it. Loineni v'loimali ben. There's no hana. There's no mi'ilah. No stealing. The mei oila, you be oila. The money of the oila, which is a voluntary oila, you bring up as an oila. And umoil ben, and the money of the oila, you are moil, you are stealing. So the money of the chatas, there's no problem if you use it. Sorry, the money of the chatas, so you shouldn't have pleasure from it, but there's no me'ilah if you're stealing, if you're using it for your own self. Why not? Because the money is being thrown away to Yam HaMelech. When we say you shouldn't have pleasure, there's a machlekes whether it's only midrabanan or even mahatar. But you're not even me'ilah where you bring a carbon and all that. The money, because remember you set aside money for 3 animals. That money which is set aside for the oila, you view oila, bring a carbon oila. But that is treated like an oila where since it's kachim, you are stealing if you use it for your own benefit. The mei shlamim, the third amount of money which is for the carbon shlamim, you view shlamim, you buy a shlamim. And there's no meal there either. But you eat it for one day, like not like an ordinary shlamim, but like a shlamim of a nazir. And the ain to unin lechem, but not like a nazir that requires bread. Here you don't because you don't have the hands of a nazir. The Mishnah Starova said that if the animal she used to consecrate while she was still a nazir belonged to her, it was from her husband. As soon as the husband annuls her net, she'll never be a nazir. So therefore, there's no purpose in this animal for her naziris. It goes right back to the husband, and it's no longer kodesh. It reverts back to ordinary animal chulin. So you might want to know who the author of that opinion is. Who is the author of the opinion, the Ba'ala Mishtabila, that the husband is not obligated to support his wife? Because if the husband is obligated to do all the sacrifice of his wife, then it became hers. And when it became hers and she sanctified it, she consecrated it, that's it. And if the husband later cancels the neder, which is only from then on in, at the time she consecrated it, she consecrated it. It was her. She was a nazir. So how come it reverts back to chulin? So it must be that the author of the Mishnah holds, but the husband is not obligated to give anything to his wife. This must follow the opinion of the Rabbanon and not Rabbi Yehuda. What are we talking about? What's this argument, Rabbanon Rabbi Yehuda? We'll see in a minute. Because the Yitzhak Rabbi Yehuda, if you're going to tell me that this follows Rabbi Yehuda, since Rabbi Yehuda holds that the husband has to take care of all the sacrifices of his wife, I might take to it. So when she sanctified it, she had every right to, so it became kodesh. So just because the husband canceled it afterwards, and she doesn't have to really bring a carbon anymore, it's too late. The animal became holy, and she had the right to do it. It's her animal. Hamishtabula. It's hers, and therefore she made it holy. It should be holy. What's going on? So it must be the author of our Mishnah Rabban. And he explains. Tanya, we learned. Rabbi Yehuda says, we learned there's a carbon that called Oila V'Yodet. That it depends. It's commensurate to how affluent you are. The richer you are, if you're very rich, you bring an animal. If you're not so rich, you bring a sheep, a cow, or an ox, or a sheep. If you're not so rich, then you bring a bird or a flower offering. So what happens if the woman is very poor, but her husband is rich? What's her status? What kind of carbon does she bring? Adam may be carbon osher alishtay. So Rabbi Yehuda says that the husband, look at the husband, because he has to pay for his wife's carbonus, and he's rich, then we have to use a rich person's carbon. Any carbon that she's obligated to bring, he has to pay according to his status. He writes in the Ksubah, that all the responsibility, that I take responsibility for all your obligations. An argument Rishonim, what about obligations that took place before she got married? Like Rashi says clearly here, that if she had to bring a carbon for something that she did before she got married, now that she's married, the husband has to take over. Other Rishonim hold only things that took place after they got married. Regardless, what did Rabbi Yehuda clearly say? That the husband takes on all the responsibility, has to give it to her. The Rabbanan disagree. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that she takes it on an animal, even if the husband cancels her neder, the animal became holy because at the time she made it holy, she was a Nazir, and the animal became her because the husband is obligated to take care of her obligation. That's it. It's too late. So our Mishnah must be the Rabbanan. And Rabbanan, the husband doesn't know anything, and therefore it reverts. If he cancels it, he offered her to help her out, but now that he canceled it, he takes the animal right back. Says Rava, no. Rava says, I feel Rabbi Yehuda. I can argue that the Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda. True, Rabbi Yehuda says that the husband must take care of the wife's obligations, but only if there's a purpose to it. For example, if she would have been a Nazir for the entire 30 days, she has to bring those kabbanas. The husband is obligated to bring it. But over here, she was only Nazir for 2 hours. So therefore, she doesn't have to bring the kabbanas because there is no term to expire. She's not going to do 30 days. So she doesn't have to bring the kabbanas. The problem is that she made it holy beforehand. In this case, the husband is not obligated to take care of obligations. That's why it reverts back to chulin, even according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rava says, "I feel Rabbi Yehuda. When does the husband obligate the things that she requires? Things she does not require, like the husband is not obligated to help her at all, and therefore it reverts back." Ikadami is another version. Man Tana, who's the author of our Mishnah, the other way around. It's only Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehudi. In fact, it's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that the husband is obligated to take care of his wife's things. That's who our Mishnah is. Why? Because only things that she needs, the husband is obligated to do. The only thing, and since she's not a Nazir anymore, so therefore she doesn't need the kabbanas, even though she made a promise while she was a Nazir to bring the kabbanas, the husband's not obligated. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore, when is the husband obligated to help her out? Only support her, only things that she requires. The milsa at this case, at this juncture, since she's no longer a Nazir, she will not have to bring these kabbanas later on. So even though she consecrated right now, the husband says if he made a condition that he'll only give it to her if she needs it. She doesn't need it anymore. Why can't it be the Rabbanan? Because the Rabbanan hold like Shabbat l'klal. Rabbanan hold he owes her nothing. He owes her nothing. So therefore, whether since the Chacham hold he owes her nothing, so therefore, according to the Chachamim, it can't be that it reverts back because nothing did to revert back. It was never hers in the first place. More explains. What do you call it? According to the Rabbanan, he owes her nothing. So therefore, how did she make it kodesh in the first place? You're telling me in the Mishnah that she made it holy, and then the thing is, after the husband cancels it, but how did she make it holy in the first place? Since according to Chachamim, the husband owes her nothing. So how can let's say the husband wasn't made for it? How did she make it holy? Even if she'll be a Nazir for 30 days, the husband doesn't have to pay the kabbanas. So therefore, how did it become holy in the first place? And are you going to tell me, but the husband does, give kabbanas? What do you mean? How's that according to the Chachamim? How can he help her out with the kabbanas? He's going to Akanyula. The only way that he can help her kabbanas is he actually gives it to her as a present. So therefore, it's no longer the husband's; it's completely hers. The kivin have it it completely is hers, and therefore, according to the Chachamim, there's no such thing as the husband's animals. The husband has to never give animals. Even if she would have remained a Nazir the full 30 days, the husband doesn't have to help her out. And if he does help her out, it's only by giving it to her completely. It became hers entirely. So therefore, our Mishnah makes a distinction whether he canceled her or he didn't cancel her. That if he didn't cancel her, it's a proper carbon, it's her carbonis. And if he did cancel her, it reverts back. Can't be according to Chachamim, because according to Chachamim, it makes no difference if he did cancel or didn't. The husband does not have to take care of the animals of the wife. Comes along Rav and says no, because if he does give her, it's completely hers. It's hers, no longer the husband's. Says the Gemara, it doesn't. How can it revert back to chulin? It's not the husband's animal. The only way that the husband takes care of his wife's karbanis, according to Rabbanan, is if he gave it to her to own. So therefore, it's her carbon. So even if the husband cancels it, it doesn't revert back to chulin. Says Rava, yes, it does. I feel Rabbanan. I can argue even the Rabbanan say the husband helps his wife out to kabbanis, he gives it over to her completely now, and therefore it's hers. Again, it's as if it's conditional, only if there's a purpose to it. But if there's no purpose to it, give it back to me. Only things that she has to do. For example, she'll be a nazir full 30 days, and he gives her the animals. But if she's a nazir for 2 hours, then even though he gave her the animals, he takes it right back, because it's as if it was given conditionally that she'll need them eventually, but not here. Something that she doesn't need eventually, he never gave it to her in the first place. The Mishnah then said, if it's hers, if the animal was hers, it shows over there that if it's a karma chatas, well, she no longer needs that, so the animal no longer has to atone for anything. So the animal, we let it die. So the question is, Minola, what do you mean she owes something? Is there a rule whatever belongs to her wife belongs to the husband? So how can an animal ever belong to her? Didn't we have a rule? Whatever the woman has goes to her husband. Amar Papa said, we'll give 2 different ways of understanding how she can have her own money. Either she kamatzta mi isasa, that there's a certain stipend that he gives her every week, and she didn't use the full money. She didn't use the full money, so she spared herself money. Machlekes is showing how it works. What happens? The price when we actually have to work. So what happened? The price went down. So therefore, she has leftover money. Does that money go back to the husband or not? But it could also be that the price hasn't gone down, but she decided not to spend the full money, but she'll spend less on herself so that she can have some money. Or somebody else gave it to her as a present. And he said, I'm giving you on the condition that your husband has no rights over there. And we learned about that in the end of the second regard. Okay, the oil is brought up as a carbon oil, and voluntary carbon oil is me'ila if you use the money for yourself stealing, and the shlamim you bring up as a shlamim, but it's not a shlamim. It's not completely like a ram of a nazir, because it's, you're not going to have chalas. So the Gemara, Shmuel said to don't please don't sit down on your feet. Please explain to me how to do the following thing. And as an argument of Shmuel saying all of this to the very end, or actually this is now speaking Abu Bari. There are 4 cases of rams of a nazir that don't require the bread. Normally a nazir requires bread. Either it doesn't require bread at all, or doesn't require the bread waving of the nazir, because there is no nazir, as we'll see. Now, case number 1 is shalai. Case number 1 is shalai, and we will explain each of these cases, which is the one we just did right now. If it belongs to the husband, then I'm going to see in a minute both of each one. Shalai is shalah if it's hers, or if it was after he died. Or after death, as we'll soon see, or after atonement. In other words, you got lost as a seedman and you found another. Shalah, what's the case of Shalah Hodama? We just learned the Mishnah, right? She used her money, so therefore it becomes an animal of a carbon. Then the husband canceled it, so therefore the animal has kedusha in it. But because she's not really a nazir, so you don't bring the bread. Okay, that's Shalai. What's the story of Shalai? Now we'll learn in the Mishnah in a week. Ish madir es b'nai. A father has the right to make his son a nazir, and either we'll see the Gemara there, either because of chinuch, either because of educating the child, or it's halacha measure. A father can make his son a nazir. The eina isha madir es b'nazir, but not a mother. What happens gilach if during the naziris he gave him a haircut, or relatives gave him a haircut. So another haircut. In other words, they're saying we don't agree with your naziris. According to the Rosh over here, it's only if the father died can the relatives cancel the naziris. Others say that even if the father is alive, relatives who see that this is not for the best interest of the child can cancel the naziris. Micha, if they protested, or the relative protested, in these cases, then the naziris is canceled. So what happens? He already set aside the money he made a son a nazir, and he already set aside the money without specifying exactly what. Now that the naziris is canceled, but at the time you set the money aside, it was naziris, it was real. So therefore, the money can be used for nedava. That means you populate the mizbeach with the oilers. What happens for Russian? If the money was, you said clearly, part of the money is a chattas, part of the money is an oiler, part of the shlamim. Then the may chattas, the money you set aside for the carbon chattas, you no longer need the chattas because it's no longer nazir. Is yechuli amamelech? You throw it away, you can't have any benefit. The may oiler, the money you set aside for an oiler, you view oiler, you purchase an oiler. Moiling behen, and just like any other oiler, which is kachim, if you use it for your own benefit, you steal it. The may shlamim, the money for a shlamim. You buy a shlamim, now you're not moil by a shlamim because it's kachim kalim until you sprinkle the blood. To make shlamim, you view a shlamim, you buy a shlamim, but different than all other shlamim, you only eat for one day. And because it's more like a shlamim of a nazir. On the other hand, the eina to uni lechem, you don't need bread. Shalacham, he said, what's the third case? After death, minolan, how do you know that after death? What do you mean? The Tanya we learned. So somebody set aside money for their naziris to buy their karbanis, and loinenin, and we didn't specify. In this case over here, you didn't even say that this money covers all 30 karbanis. You just said this money will be used for my naziris. Could be you'll have to add more money. So in that case, loinenin, you shouldn't have any hana. Argument the Rabbanan of the Torah should have ended with this money because you're using it for carbon, but the Leimaylim, there's no Mila. Why is no Mila? Included in that money, you also have a carbon oil. So why is no Ilim? Because you didn't specify that this money covers all three kabbanas. I can argue that this money is only to purchase a carbon shlamim, and you'll add more money to buy the other kabbanas. Therefore, there's no Me'ila here whatsoever. Mace, this person now died. And they had money that was stumim, but in this case over here, Taisa already explained, stumim means you said that this money will cover all three kabbalas, which means included in that money you also have a karmachatas. So yiplu nedava. So right now, all that money is used for nedava, and the Gemara will discuss tomorrow. But there's a karmachatas money involved over there. Why? How can you use all that money for nedava? Shouldn't the money that's set aside for chatas be tossed away? Mois before Russian, if you clearly spelled out the money, then you didn't just say that this is the kabbanas. You spelled out, how much for each carbon. Is the may chatas? What do you do with the money of the chatas? You throw it away. That money you shouldn't have any benefit from, but that money as well, if you use it for yourself, there's no stealing because it's not going to turn into a karmachatas. You're throwing it away. What about the may oila? What about the money for an oila? Then you purchase with that money an oila, and again, because it's a carbon oila, if you use it for your benefit, you will be stealing. Shlamim, the money you set aside for shlamim, you bring a shlamim, but different than all other kabbalah shlamim, which normally can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. You only eat 1 day. The eino tu'unin lechem, but different than a carbon nazir, you don't require bread. What about shalachar kapara? You set aside the money for animals, or you set aside animals, and then the animals the money got lost, and then you set aside other money or other kabbalas, and then you found the original one. Svaru, the svar is that one should be treated just like after the person died. Just like after the person died, there's no need for atonement. Here too, there's no need for atonement with this money. After Misa, so here we're talking about you set aside the animal and you lost it and you bought another animal, then you found the original one. Or you set aside money, same thing. So matam what's the whole reason over there? We say that that just like after Misa, there's no need anymore for a kapara for the chatas. The same thing here. If you lost the animal, you bought another one. This animal you don't need anymore. You don't need any more for atonement. Those are the 4 cases that we say that the ram does not need bread, loaves of bread, because you don't need any more atonement. Now, could be Shmuel saying all this, and he's asking our question to Avu, or could be Avu is saying that these are the 4 cases. So my question is, says Shmuel, there's a 5th case. Or is there a case where it says V'shar kol shalmei nazir? Talk about a carbon shlamim if he didn't do it correctly. All other shlamim that belong to a nazir, Sheshachton, if you shechted it shaloikim mitzvasim incorrectly, for example, you had the wrong thing in mind, or you're supposed to have a 2-year-old animal, you use a 1-year-old animal, shadim, it's still kosher because you shechted it properly, just because you had the wrong carbon in mind. But the owner cannot say, "Oh, I fulfill my obligation," because at the time of shechita you had in mind another carbon. So even though you had in mind, let's say for a shlamim, nevertheless we treat it like the shlamim of a nazir, you can only eat for one day. But the einon tu'unin loy lechem, you don't need bread. So what do we see? A fifth case where it's a shalmi nazir, but you don't need bread. So why do we only list 4? The loy zroya, nor do you need the zroya, the foreleg, which normally goes by a nazir, that you have to zroya b'shela cook it. You don't need it here because there's no kapara. So my question is, why isn't it counted? Says the Gemara, b'mitzvasan kachashiv. We're only counting cases we did it correctly, but still you don't have to bring the bread for the 4 cases that we learned over here. But shalaik mitzvasan, if you shechted incorrectly, like a chashiv, we're not counting such